A very good day and welcome to you. My name is Dr. Karen, and I'm so excited to share this health and vitality bootcamp with you. And we're going to start the series with nutrition basics. Now, in this particular session, which is our first session, I'd like to take a little bit of time and allow you to think and reflect on what your reason is for being here. Each of us has got different goals with specific things that we would like to change and improve on in life. And I'd like you to take a little bit of time to think about what it is that you would like to achieve. An exercise that I often ask my patients to do is to write a list of reasons why they are doing something. And I'd like you to do that too. Take a pen and a paper, write down 20 reasons why you have decided to embark on this course, why you are here, and what you would like to achieve at the end of it. It's very helpful to make you think, really focus on your reasons for why you are doing something, and that will drive a little bit of extra motivation. Also, you then have something written down that you can refer back to later, and you can see whether your goals and your ambitions are being achieved, and that in itself will motivate you further. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, just so that you've got a feel for who I am, what I do, and also my story that has motivated me to look at nutrition and lifestyle as my particular focus in my practice. After that, we're going to look at the importance of nutrition as part of our life, and we're going to talk about food groups and energy. So my story is that I'm a medical doctor. I come from South Africa and I trained at Cape Town. And before that, I had a struggle, my own personal struggle, with health problems, particularly related to being overweight and being obese. And you can see these pictures on the left-hand side are photographs of me probably 20 years ago, and the picture on the right is more recent. So as a child and into high school, I was overweight. I didn't do much exercise. I ate really badly. I spent a lot of time on the couch. And as a result, there was a period of time where I was actually hospitalized for high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, and had to have CT scans, MRIs, investigations. It was quite a serious health complication that I faced at that point. And so this really struck a chord for me. And following that, I decided to change my life. And since then, obviously, I have a far more healthy lifestyle from the perspective of nutrition, but I actually teach group fitness now. So besides being a medical doctor as my day job, I have a side hustle of teaching fitness. And I'm probably the healthiest I've ever been in my life at the moment. And generally, people will never believe where I came from when they look at me now. And I'd like you to take that as a little bit of an inspiration. The other reason why I'm telling you this is because oftentimes there's certain diets and health interventions or lifestyle interventions or even products that a lot of people sell that promise you dramatic and very quick results. And some of them work, meaning that you do lose weight quite quickly, you do see results quite quickly, but oftentimes there's a rebound effect. And so it ends up that you actually gain a lot of the weight back that you lost, and it's not sustainable. So as you can see from my personal experience, I've managed to maintain those changes over the long term, and I'd like to share those tools and tricks and all the skills that I have gained over that period of time that have allowed me to sustain those changes, essentially keep the weight off, stay healthy, and maintain a level of well-being and vitality. So let's have a look now, if we can change gear a little bit, to what our bodies are made of. And really, I'd like you to focus on this particular graphic because it speaks volumes to how important nutrition is from the perspective of feeding our body with what it needs. And you'll notice that if we look at this drawing, that your body is made up of about 62% water. That's huge. So this is one thing that I see a lot in my clinical practice, is that people actually don't hydrate themselves well enough. And we must remember that every single reaction that takes place in the body, every single chemical change that happens requires water. And we need to replenish that water all the time. And particularly if you are an active person, or if you live in a climate where you will perspire more, where it's hotter or more humid, you actually need to replenish even more. So first of all, please remember hydration is essential. Probably the second most important nutrient is protein. And protein is responsible for all of our tissues. So all of our muscle tissue, all of the walls of our blood vessels, most of our cells contain proteins, all of the chemical messengers, things like enzymes and hormones, a lot of them are proteins as well. And so from a nutritional perspective, we need to make sure that we get enough of protein. And probably similar to the amount of protein that you take is fat. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of people who think that this is quite frightening and a bit absurd, and that's probably because we've been taught up until recently that fat is very dangerous, and fat causes heart attacks, and fat makes you fat. However, there's a lot of new research and new evidence that suggests that incorporating more fat, obviously healthy and beneficial fat, in the diet is very important. And we will chat a little bit later about what the functions of fat are in the body. But what I'd like to emphasize here is that fat is an essential nutrient. You do need some fat in your diet. And we probably, most of us, can actually do with a little bit of more fat in our diet than what we're taking already. Then we talk about minerals. So minerals are micronutrients, but they actually make up quite a significant proportion of our body. So if you think of things like calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, things that make up our bones, for instance, all of those are minerals. And our body is made up plus or minus 6% of minerals. And the most important source of minerals for us are vegetables and fruits. So I'd like you to think carefully about also potentially incorporating a little bit more of those mineral-rich nutrients in your diet, but we'll chat about that a little bit more later. What surprises many people when we look at this body composition diagram is how little carbohydrate is actually in our body. So plus or minus 1% of what we are made of is carbohydrate. And by that we mean glucose, which is the energy that is circulating in our bloodstream and providing energy for our cells to work, as well as glycogen, which is like an easily accessible form of energy storage that can quickly be converted into glucose if we need it. But what you realize is that actually we don't need that much carbohydrate if we compare to things like protein and fat when we think about the context of what our body is made of. So just to summarize, reiterate, our body is made up of a lot of water, a good amount of protein and fat, a lot of minerals, which obviously we get from our vegetables and our fruits, as well as a little bit of carbohydrate. And if you can remember this diagram, a lot of what we are going to talk about in the coming weeks will make a lot more sense to you. So let's chat a little bit about the basic food groups. I mean, obviously we've spoken about that briefly, looking at what our bodies are made of. But the food groups can be divided into carbohydrates, which is like your bread, your rice, your pasta, your grains, all the starchy foods. Fats, which obviously are plant fats, things like oils, as well as animal fats, which come a lot of the time from our dairy products or the physical fat that you can see on meat or on chicken, for instance. Our proteins, again, divided into animal and plant-based proteins. Fiber, which predominantly comes from plants, as well as alcohol. Now, here you might be a little bit surprised, but alcohol is considered a food group. And we'll chat again in a little bit more detail about this, but alcohol can contribute a significant number of calories for people who take it quite regularly. And then we have our vitamins, our minerals, and our water. And these are the basic food groups that we will obviously chat in more detail about as we go. Let's talk about energy. So, energy is what allows us to do our work, our activities for the day. And different food groups contain different amounts of energy. Carbohydrates, for instance, contain about 4 calories per gram. Fats contain a lot of energy per gram. So fats probably contain the most energy per weight of all the food groups. And then your proteins and your carbohydrates are similar. Alcohol, like I mentioned before, contains a lot of calories. So just a little bit less than fat, in fact. So one needs to be careful if you're looking from a weight management perspective about taking in too much alcohol. And fiber contains very little absorbable energy. So this is helpful because if you eat high fiber foods, you tend to have a lower intake of total energy. Your vitamins, your minerals, and your water don't contain any energy at all. So this concept of how much energy is contained per gram or per volume of food is known as energy density. And when we're talking about weight, we obviously need to think about how much energy comes into our body system versus how much energy we are exerting or how much energy goes out in order to keep the balance. Have a look at this particular image. I love this because it's quite a wonderful illustration of different foods. But what's particularly important is that each section is exactly 100 calories. So what that means is that for 3 mandarins, you can eat 4 marshmallows and have exactly the same amount of energy intake. You could have 2 chocolate chip cookies, or you could have quite a big amount of cherry tomatoes. So this is a visual representation of energy density, and you can see obviously that different foods contain different amounts of energy, and that will translate into the volume of food that you can eat for the same number of calories. Now, when we think about energy and we think about weight in particular, there is a balance. And as I said before, we have to think about the calories that go into the system versus the calories that we are exerting and that go out of the system. If you want to maintain your weight, the number of calories going in must equal plus or minus the number of calories that are going out. If you want to lose weight, on the other hand, the number of calories that go in need to be less than the number of calories that go out. And obviously, if you want to gain weight, you need to have more calories coming in than what you are losing. So what I'd like to expand upon a little bit more is actually how many calories go out, and that's the exertion section of the energy balance. So obviously calories going in, this is all our food and all our drink, and that's where we get our calories from. We're not like plants where we can lie in the sun and then photosynthesize and get energy from that. We do have to eat and drink to get our energy. whereas the amount of energy going out of the system is determined by three things. The first is your basal metabolism. So this is the amount of energy that your body is using when you are asleep, essentially sleep mode. All that's happening is that your heart is beating, you're breathing, you're circulating your blood, you are giving oxygen to your cells, but you're not thinking, you're not doing exercise, you're not planning for your wedding, you're not doing anything else. You are simply in sleep mode, and this is what is called the basal metabolism. The second form of energy out is physical activity. And this, you will understand, is when you move around, when you do stuff, when you think as well. That does burn a little bit of energy too. And so physical activity can be divided into what you do on a day-to-day basis as your normal activities, and also planned physical activity. So going to the gym, playing soccer with your friends, going horse riding, those types of things where it's a scheduled activity and it's specifically to be active. So that's physical activity. Most of us understand these two concepts of the basal metabolism and your activity, physical activity that you do every day. The third element of energy balance, where energy is going out, is something called the thermic effect of feeding. And this is interesting because actually when you eat or you drink anything, it takes energy to break that food down and allow it to be absorbed into the body. So think, for example, if you're going to have a nice juicy steak, you physically have to cut the steak into pieces, but this is physical activity. But when it goes into the digestion system, there's a chewing action that happens. You have to release certain enzymes to start the breakdown of that food in your mouth. You then have muscular contractions as you swallow, and the esophagus, which is the swallowing pipe, transports that food down into your stomach, which has a big sort of churning effect. The stomach is a very muscular, very, very powerful, strong organ. And the stomach will also produce quite a lot of digestive juices. That takes energy to produce and allow those juices to be formed. And then the food has to go down into the intestine, which is also a muscular tube. So in order for you to derive the energy from that food, there is actually quite a lot of work that has to be done by your body in order to break that food down into its smaller components, which can be absorbed. And this is called the thermal effect of feeding. Many people who have in fact had a large piece of steak, for instance, will know the meat sweats or the steak sweats, where you physically break a sweat because you've eaten a high protein meal or high protein load. So that's because the amount of energy that's being used is almost like going to the gym. So it's quite fascinating when you think about these things and you learn a little bit more about how your body works. So for those of us who are embarking on this journey from the perspective of wanting to change your weight, I'd like you to think a little bit about this energy balance. There are areas from the perspective of calories in that we can tweak, and this we're going to focus predominantly on in this course, looking at the nutrition side of things. And then obviously from the calories out perspective, it's mainly the physical activity where we can work in order to optimize that if change in weight is really your goal. I hope that this session has been useful to you. I hope that you've learned something, and I really challenge you to think about, as we said at the beginning, your reasons for wanting to learn more about nutrition and apply some interesting information about healthy nutrition to your life and what you would like to achieve from doing so. I look forward to seeing you in our next session. Take care.